The Boston Celtics over the past couple of years have just been experts at almost winning a championship or almost going to the finals. But with the addition of Jrue Holiday as well as Kristaps Porzingis this offseason, there's a good chance the Celtics have finally addressed their issues and are ready to finally win their first title in the, I guess we'll call it the Jays era. Have they done enough? Let's talk about it. Real quick before I get into this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe. Also drop a like. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So the Boston Celtics just landed Jrue Holiday. I did my initial trade reaction over on my second channel, which I guess was a mistake because those videos were popping off for other people. I should have put it over here. I wasn't sure that Jrue Holiday would drive enough clicks, but apparently anything Celtics does, so here I am. And I wanted to talk about what this Celtics roster looks like in general this upcoming season. Now, the first thing I want to address is easily the biggest criticism of this trade as well as the Porzingis trade by extension, which is that the Celtics have lost a lot of depth. The argument is that they got rid of Marcus Smart, Grant Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and Robert Williams, and they got back Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And while Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis might be better players than any of those individual four players is better than 2. I understand that perspective, but I think something that is lost on people in regards to especially this Jrue Holiday trade is that they were already dealing with guys who probably weren't going to be there regularly anyways. How many times now has Robert Williams not either played whatsoever in a playoff game or a series or played limited minutes because he just simply was not physically capable of playing longer? The guy has been riddled with injuries constantly. Malcolm Brogdon also got a major injury in this previous postseason, and it made him rather difficult to ship off until the context of the Jrue Holiday situation came and he just ended up being salary filler. But in terms of being an actual asset and a actually very good basketball player, there's a decent chance Malcolm Brogdon's best days are behind him due to that injury. We'll have to wait and see, of course, but there's some real concern. I believe it was like a degenerative injury, which are the things that really hinder a career. So with that said, already we're talking about 2 guys who there was a good chance they were going to be non-factors for decent chunks of any playoff run that the Celtics would have going forward. But the second thing is you're seeing multiple times over the there is no depth to this team criticism, specifically when you're looking at teams in the Eastern Conference and looking at Eastern Conference contenders. After trading for Damian Lillard, the Milwaukee Bucks also don't really have much of a bench unit. Right now, I would say they probably have 7 players that I'm confident are playoff rotation guys. The Miami Heat have a tendency to turn guys that you've never heard of into like super high value role players, so I'm not going to discount the possibility that they do that yet again, but at least as of right now, they look like a very thin roster to be sure. The Philadelphia 76ers, same exact thing, especially if James Harden does not end up playing. So after that, the Cleveland Cavaliers have depth. Does that make them better than the Celtics, than the Bucks, than the Heat, maybe the Sixers? I don't know about that. I don't know if depth is ultimately really going to be a problem if everybody else in your conference, everybody else that would potentially stop you from winning a title, also doesn't have depth. The other thing, of course, that is worthy of mention is that the Celtics can make more moves to fill out that bench. I definitely don't feel great about their big man rotation specifically. Whether or not they start Porzingis or Al Horford at center, I'm not really sure what direction they're going to go. Either way, both of those lineups are great. I'm just not that sure about Porzingis at center long term, but I'm also not all that sure about it with Al Horford given his age. So one way or the other, it's not great. You have the very injury prone Kristaps Porzingis, at least historically. I believe his last season was like the healthiest season he's played in a very long time, but one way or the other, definitely not known for being reliable to show up on a game-by-game basis, and a super old Al Horford, and those are pretty much your only playable guys in the front court. I know that they signed Wenlin Gabriel. I don't think he's really a playoff rotation guy, at least I really doubt it. So that's not great, but the Celtics still have assets that they can move in terms of like draft capital. They could potentially trade Peyton Pritchard, who I think you could get a real player for. One way or the other, there's depth that can be added, and we should stop talking about it like these are the finalized rosters for really any of these teams, especially the Celtics and the Bucks, because there will be guys who get bought out that are interested in going there. And a year from now, especially, they're going to be able to sign a bunch of veteran guys for very cheap money because they're ring chasing. That's just kind of the nature of these things. I think the criticism of a lack of depth is one that is so often overblown. Don't get me wrong, depth can absolutely be important and it can be the reason why a team wins, but more often than not, what matters is the guys that you have at the top. And if you are looking at the Celtics starting lineup, whether it be Derek White or Al Horford, who is coming off of the bench, it is a damn impressive starting lineup. Their best lineup would probably be Jrue Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, and Al Horford. At least that's my guess. That easily has the most rim protection, the most versatility defensively, and the most size. They could also, of course, go with Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. But I don't know if Tatum at power forward is something that they should keep doing. It was definitely a thing that had become a recurring issue for them, was that they really didn't have the size, and going from no power forward to just Porzingis playing center instead of Al Horford, it's just not great. I would rather have that tall four be that tall four rather than the center. And not to mention, Derek White as a six man is insanely good. I don't know if there's a single bench player in the league that's better than Derek White will be. Derek White, by the way, just one of the most underrated players in the entire league. The amount of people that I saw say like who's guarding Dame on the Celtics before the Jrue Holiday trade, Derek White could have done a damn fine job. He was literally all defense last year. But of course, Jrue Holiday is a better option for Damian Lillard, and he does have a historical precedent of locking down Dame in the playoffs. It was obviously quite a while ago, so I'm not really banking on either of those guys being the same players that they were 5 years ago, but Jrue Holiday definitely has the goods to give Damian Lillard issues. Not to mention, he also has a significant amount of motivation to beat the team that just traded him when he wanted to retire there. So from that point of view, I think the Celtics made the right moves here. I think that Jrue Holiday, you replace the loss of Marcus Smart and the defense and playmaking that he brings to the table, while he also can be a much more capable half-court scorer. Now, speaking of that, another big concern that exists with this trade is that Jrue Holiday is one of the most notable playoff droppers of any star-level player, all-star level player in the NBA. He historically just disappears in terms of his scoring presence in the postseason. One way or the other, he's still going to be a fantastic defender. One way or the other, he's still going to make plays on the ball, get a lot of assists, and set up his teammates. But when it's called upon him to actually score the ball, Jrue Holiday is probably going to disappoint you in the postseason. I got a little bit of flack in my initial reaction because I said that Jrue is not the strongest outside shooter. And if you look, his seasons with Milwaukee, he shot basically 40% from three on 5 attempts. And his last season, easily the best three-point shooting season of his career. And that's all true, and that's great. In the regular season, Jrue Holiday's jump shot, perfectly reliable. However, in the postseason with Milwaukee, he has shot 30% from three. And that includes their championship run. That includes when they got railed by the Miami Heat. Either way, Jrue Holiday cannot shoot in the postseason, and it's happened over a big enough sample that it's something that I am quite concerned about. Even Marcus Smart, I think, could be perceived as a more reliable postseason three-point shooter, at least at times. He's also wildly inconsistent. That said, there's a huge difference here. Last year, when, as I mentioned, the Bucks got railed by the Heat, Jrue Holiday was the third option, and oftentimes the second option when Giannis wasn't there. And hell, I would argue he arguably was the second option over Chris Middleton, but Chris Middleton played great in that series. And then, the season where they lost to the Celtics in Game 7 in the second round, Jrue Holiday was the second option. And even on their championship run, he was their third option, but it was still ultimately fine. They won a championship, obviously. But he's going to be a fourth option here, not called upon to be even a third, and especially not a second. So it's a lot bigger of a deal if your second option or your third option just completely disappears and can't score the damn ball. But if Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum and Kristaps Porzingis have it going, or really just two out of those three guys, you still probably have enough offense that it's okay that Jrue Holiday is struggling with the ball. Really, what's more concerning is if he becomes so inept from outside in the postseason that teams cease to respect him from outside, and then he just is not a threat, and it makes it super easy to bring an extra defender to those guys. But defensively, this team should be ridiculous. Offensively, I do worry about his floor spacing, but I don't really worry about his playoff drop in production because I don't think the Celtics need it the way that the Bucks did. So this is a great trade for them. The Porzingis trade was also a good trade for them, even though it was one that I was a little apprehensive towards because of the loss of Marcus Smart. Now that you have Jrue Holiday, I'm no longer apprehensive to it. So ultimately, an excellent offseason for the Celtics. The question is it enough? Is this team good enough? Is this team finally going to win a championship this year? First of all, I don't think they're better than the Bucks. That's the thing that stands out immediately. As previously mentioned, neither of these teams have depth. So looking purely at the starting lineup, Dame and Giannis complement each other to such a significant degree that it's like unbelievable. Like, this is truly like the modern Kobe and Shaq. And I'm gonna make a Bucks video, so I don't want to get into it too much, but I think a lot of people are overthinking that team and thinking there's gonna be a bunch of different reasons why it could fail. They're damn terrifying, and they should be taken very seriously. It wouldn't surprise me if the Celtics were good enough to beat them. I do think they have a very favorable matchup for sure, especially now that they have more height with Kristaps Porzingis there. No one really to defend Giannis individually, but I do think they can put up enough bodies in front of the rim to like make it not just a cakewalk for him. I do think that the Bucks would beat the Celtics in a series. However, I don't think it is guaranteed. I also think that if Damian Lillard wasn't on the Bucks, then yes, the Celtics would be the strong favorites. Unfortunately for them, he is though, so you have to worry about that. In terms of being better than the Denver Nuggets, I also don't know about that. I think the Celtics still ultimately come in at third. And another big issue that it can't seem to get out of my head. The biggest issue I have with the Celtics year after year after year is consistency. Like, I harp on this every single year, where one game you get a great version of the Celtics and the next you're like, why is a lottery team in the conference finals right now? Because that's how they play sometimes. And it's genuinely very maddening. Not only are they very inconsistent on offense, they can be very inconsistent on defense. And while I don't really worry about the defensive consistency too much, Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis are not exactly beacons of consistency. They're not exactly known for their reliability in a postseason. They're not exactly, especially in Porzingis' case, known for reliability in terms of even actually playing. So that is what concerns me, is that their biggest issue before was inconsistency, and then they went and exchanged their players, arguably their more consistent players, for more inconsistent players. So that really is my biggest concern with them. Defense should be good, offense should be good most of the time, but for the time that it's not, that's when teams like the Bucks, or if they beat the Bucks, the Denver Nuggets will beat them in the margins. That said, I think the Eastern Conference belongs to one of the two teams in green. It's going one of those two ways, unless injuries just completely derail this whole thing. So the Celtics do have very strong title hopes, and I do think they have a very strong chance of, finishing those hopes. Finishing those hopes, is that even a phrase? Whatever. The point is, the Celtics can win a championship, but I'm still putting them third in my pecking order, below the Bucks and the Nuggets. I'll talk more about the Bucks in an upcoming video, but yeah, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.